Jason Matthews never felt like he belonged anywhere. At 17, he was the kid who sat alone at lunch, the one who preferred books to basketball, the one whose idea of a perfect Saturday was volunteering at the local animal shelter instead of hanging out at the mall. His classmates thought he was weird, and maybe they were right. But Jason didn't care much about their opinions anymore. It was December 15th, and the worst snowstorm of the year was hitting their small town. The wind howled like angry wolves, and the snow fell so thick you could barely see 10 feet ahead. Most people were safe inside their warm homes, but Jason had stayed late at the library working on a history project. By the time he finished, the buses had stopped running and his parents were stuck at work. Jason pulled his thin jacket tight and started the long walk home. His sneakers were already soaked through, and his fingers were going numb despite his gloves. He took a shortcut through the alley behind the shopping center, where the dumpsters created some shelter from the wind. That's when he heard it. A tiny whimpering sound, barely audible over the storm. Jason stopped and listened carefully. There it was again, coming from behind a large green dumpster. He pushed through the snow that had piled up against the metal container and found something that broke his heart. A golden retriever puppy, so small he could fit in Jason's hands, was curled up in a soggy cardboard box. The little creature was shivering uncontrollably, his golden fur matted with ice and dirt. His eyes were barely open, and he was so weak he could hardly lift his tiny head. Someone had thrown him away like garbage. Jason didn't think twice. He scooped up the freezing puppy and tucked him inside his jacket, feeling the little body trembling against his chest. The puppy was ice cold and felt lighter than a textbook. Jason could feel the tiny heartbeat fluttering like a bird's wing. He ran home through the blizzard, slipping and sliding on the icy sidewalks, but holding the puppy carefully. His lungs burned from the cold air, but he didn't slow down. Every few minutes, he would whisper to the little creature, telling him everything would be okay, that he was safe now. When Jason burst through his front door, soaking wet and covered in snow, his mother almost fainted. She was about to scold him for being so late when she saw what he was carrying. The puppy was barely breathing, his little pink tongue hanging out weakly. His parents, Sarah and Tom Matthews, had never been pet people. They worried about the mess, the expenses, the responsibility. But when they saw their son carefully warming the dying puppy with towels, feeding him drops of warm milk with an eyedropper, staying up all night to make sure he kept breathing, they couldn't say no. Jason named him Buddy on the first night, when the puppy finally opened his eyes and looked directly at Jason, as if to say thank you. From that moment, they were connected in a way that went beyond the normal bond between boy and dog. Jason spent the next week nursing Buddy back to health. He researched everything about caring for puppies, set alarms to feed him every 2 hours, and slept on the floor beside the small dog bed he had bought with his savings. Slowly, Buddy grew stronger. His golden fur became fluffy and bright. His eyes sparkled with life, and his tail started wagging whenever Jason entered the room. His mother often found Jason talking to Buddy as if the puppy understood every word. And somehow, it seemed like he did. When Jason was sad about a bad grade or a lonely day at school, Buddy would crawl into his lap and rest his small head on Jason's chest. When Jason was excited about something, Buddy would bounce around the room with him. The loneliness that had followed Jason everywhere began to fade. He had found his best friend in the most unexpected place, and Buddy had found a family who would love him forever. Neither of them knew that their bond would soon be tested in ways they never imagined. Tuesday morning started like any other day in the Matthews household. Jason's alarm went off at 6:15, but as usual, Buddy was already awake, sitting patiently beside the bed with his tail wagging softly. Jason reached down to pet his golden fur, feeling the familiar comfort of his best friend's presence. But this morning was different. Jason had his most important economics exam in just 2 hours, worth 40% of his final grade. He had studied for weeks, but his stomach was still churning with nervousness. Buddy seemed to sense his anxiety and stayed extra close as Jason got dressed. following him to the kitchen for their usual breakfast. Jason's mind was completely focused on the exam. He went through his mental notes while eating his cereal, reviewing supply and demand curves, market structures, and economic theories. His mother reminded him to take out the trash cans to the curb before he left, since it was garbage day. Jason nodded absently, his thoughts entirely on the test questions he would face. After breakfast, Jason grabbed the 2 large trash cans and wheeled them out to the street. Buddy followed him to the backyard gate, as he always did, watching through the chain-link fence as Jason completed his chore. The spring morning was beautiful, with birds singing and a gentle breeze rustling the new leaves on the oak tree. Jason's phone buzzed with a text from his study group, reminding him about a last-minute review session before the exam. His heart raced as he realized he was running late. He quickly wheeled the empty trash cans back through the gate, gave Buddy a quick pat on the head, and rushed into the house to grab his backpack. In his hurry, Jason didn't notice that the gate latch hadn't clicked properly. The metal piece sat just barely in place, held only by gravity and luck. It was the kind of mistake that happens to everyone, the tiny oversight that can change everything. Jason kissed his mother goodbye, promised to call her after the exam, and rushed out the front door to his car. As he backed out of the driveway, he could see Buddy watching him from the kitchen window, his golden face pressed against the glass. Jason waved at his best friend and drove off toward campus, his mind already back on economic graphs and formulas. For the next 3 hours, Jason sat in the exam room, completely absorbed in answering questions about market failures and consumer behavior. He had no idea that back at home, a curious squirrel had discovered the bird feeder in the neighbor's yard and was putting on quite an acrobatic show. Buddy had been napping peacefully in his favorite sunny spot in the kitchen when movement in the backyard caught his eye. The squirrel was jumping from branch to branch, its fluffy tail twitching as it tried to reach the bird seed. Buddy had always been fascinated by squirrels, though he had never caught one. His hunting instincts kicked in, and he trotted to the back door, whining softly to be let out. Jason's mother, Sarah, was in the laundry room with the washing machine running. She didn't hear Buddy's request to go outside. After 10 minutes of waiting, Buddy decided to check his usual exit. He pushed through his dog door into the backyard and immediately spotted the squirrel, now on the ground gathering fallen seeds. The chase was on. Buddy barked with excitement and raced across the yard. The squirrel, startled by the sudden golden blur, ran straight for the gate. As it squeezed under the loose latch, the gate swung wide open. Buddy, focused entirely on his prey, followed without hesitation. The squirrel darted under parked cars and through bushes, leading Buddy farther and farther from home. 3 blocks away, it scampered up a telephone pole, chattering angrily down at the dog. Buddy barked a few times, then looked around, suddenly realizing he was in an unfamiliar neighborhood. He turned to go home, but every street looked the same. The scents were different here, confusing. For the first time in his life, Buddy was lost. He began walking in what he thought was the right direction, his tail no longer wagging, his ears drooping with worry. Meanwhile, Jason was finishing his exam, feeling confident about his answers. He had no idea that his best friend was wandering through stranger neighborhoods, searching desperately for the way home. The years flew by like pages in a photo album, and Buddy grew from a tiny puppy into a beautiful golden retriever with a coat that shone like sunlight. But more than his size had changed. The bond between Jason and Buddy had deepened into something extraordinary that made everyone who saw them stop and stare. Jason was now 22, finishing his last year of college, and Buddy was 5 years old. They had developed routines that seemed almost magical to outsiders. Every morning at exactly 6:30, Buddy would gently wake Jason by placing his soft paw on Jason's shoulder. No alarm clock needed. He never barked or jumped on the bed. He just waited patiently until Jason opened his eyes, then wagged his tail as if to say good morning. Their morning runs had become legendary in the neighborhood. Jason would lace up his running shoes and Buddy would sit by the door with his leash in his mouth, tail wagging with excitement. They would run exactly 2 miles through Maple Street, down to the park, around the lake, and back home. Buddy never needed a leash during these runs. He stayed perfectly beside Jason, matching his pace, slowing down when Jason got tired, speeding up when Jason felt energetic. Mrs. Henderson from next door often watched them from her kitchen window and swore that Buddy looked both ways before crossing streets. She told her husband that the dog was smarter than most people she knew. After their run, they would share breakfast together. Jason's mother had long ago given up trying to keep Buddy away from the table. The dog had somehow trained the whole family to include him in meals. He would sit in his special spot beside Jason's chair, never begging or making noise, just waiting patiently. Jason would always save a piece of his scrambled eggs or toast for Buddy, and the dog would take it gently from Jason's hand like a polite dinner guest. The most amazing thing about their relationship was how Buddy seemed to read Jason's emotions. When Jason had a difficult exam coming up, Buddy would lie quietly beside his desk while he studied, occasionally resting his head on Jason's lap, as if offering encouragement. When Jason felt stressed about his future after college, Buddy would bring him his favorite tennis ball, as if suggesting they play and forget about worries for a while. Jason's friends from college thought their friendship was incredible. Mike, Jason's roommate, often joked that Buddy was more reliable than most humans. Lisa, Jason's study partner, said she had never seen anything like the way Buddy seemed to understand whole conversations. When Jason talked about his day, Buddy would tilt his head from side to side. His brown eyes focused intently on Jason's face, as if he was following every word. The neighborhood kids loved Buddy too. He was gentle with the smallest children, energetic enough to play with the older ones, and protective when strangers came around. Jason would take Buddy to the local park on weekends, and children would gather around them. Buddy seemed to know exactly how to behave with each child, playing gently with the shy ones and running wild with the adventurous ones. Jason's parents were amazed by how their son had changed since Buddy came into their lives. The quiet, lonely teenager had become a confident young man. He smiled more, talked more, and seemed comfortable in his own skin. They knew that Buddy had been more than just a pet. He had been Jason's companion through the difficult teenage years, his comfort during late-night study sessions, and his motivation to get outside and exercise every day. Sometimes, Jason would sit on his bed with Buddy beside him and remember that snowy night 5 years ago. He would run his fingers through Buddy's soft fur and whisper thank you for choosing to trust him. Buddy would always respond by resting his head on Jason's leg and looking up at him with those knowing brown eyes that seemed to say, "You saved me, but I saved you too." Their connection was so strong that Jason sometimes wondered if they could read each other's minds. He had heard about dogs being loyal, but this felt like something deeper. Buddy wasn't just his pet or even his best friend. He was his family, his partner in life, his constant companion who made every ordinary day feel special. They had no idea that their perfect life together was about to be tested in the most frightening way possible. Buddy had been wandering for 3 days now, and every bone in his body ached with exhaustion. His beautiful golden coat was dirty and matted with burrs from sleeping under bushes. His paws were sore from walking on hot pavement, and his stomach felt empty and twisted with hunger. Worst of all, he couldn't find the familiar sense that would lead him home to Jason. When Buddy first saw the big man on the loud motorcycle, every instinct told him to run and hide. The machine made scary noises, and the man looked fierce with markings all over his skin. But Buddy was too tired to run anymore, and something about the way the man moved told him this person wouldn't hurt him. Tank approached with infinite patience, moving slowly and speaking in a voice so gentle it surprised even him. He had dealt with frightened animals before, and he knew the key was letting them set the pace. The golden retriever was clearly someone's beloved pet, well-trained and gentle despite his fear. The beef jerky disappeared in seconds, and Buddy looked up at Tank with hopeful eyes that seemed to ask for more kindness. Tank had never seen such expressive eyes on a dog before. This animal was special, he could tell. Someone was probably heartbroken looking for him. Tank looked around the busy highway, hoping to see missing dog posters or someone searching nearby. But there was only rushing traffic and indifferent strangers. He couldn't leave this beautiful dog to wander into the path of speeding cars. The thought of anything happening to this gentle creature made Tank's chest tighten with emotion. Making a decision that felt both crazy and completely right, Tank decided to take the dog home with him. But first, he had to figure out how to get a large dog onto a motorcycle safely. Tank had seen police dogs trained to ride on motorcycles, but this dog had probably never been on anything louder than a family car. Tank spoke soothingly to Buddy while he slowly brought his bike closer. To his amazement, the dog seemed to understand that Tank was trying to help him. When Tank gently lifted him onto the seat, Buddy remained perfectly still, as if he knew his life depended on trusting this stranger. Tank drove slower than he had ever driven in his life, one hand on the handlebars and the other wrapped protectively around Buddy. The dog pressed against Tank's chest, finding comfort in the warmth and steady heartbeat. Cars honked at Tank for going so slow, but he didn't care. His only concern was getting his new friend to safety. When they reached Tank's apartment above the motorcycle shop, Buddy followed him upstairs on shaky legs. Tank's small living space was simple and clean, filled with motorcycle magazines and tools, but it felt warmer somehow with the dog's presence. Tank found an old towel and gently cleaned Buddy's fur, talking quietly as he worked. He had no dog food, so he cooked some ground beef and rice, watching in amazement as Buddy ate with careful, polite bites despite his obvious hunger. This dog had been taught good manners by someone who loved him. That first night, Tank made a bed for Buddy on the floor beside his own bed. But when he woke up in the morning, he found the golden retriever sleeping peacefully on the rug at the foot of his bed, as if he had been doing it for years. Over the next 2 weeks, Tank and Buddy developed an unexpected friendship that changed both their lives. Tank had never owned a pet before, but caring for Buddy filled an emptiness in his heart he hadn't even realized was there. The dog followed him everywhere, even down to the shop where Tank worked on motorcycles. Buddy seemed to sense that Tank was going through a difficult time. When Tank sat on his couch worrying about bills and feeling sorry for himself, Buddy would rest his head on Tank's lap, offering silent comfort with his warm brown eyes. When Tank felt angry about his failed job interviews or his ex-girlfriend, Buddy would bring him an old tennis ball he had found, somehow knowing that play could heal hurt feelings. Tank started talking to Buddy about his problems, something he had never done with another living soul. The dog was an excellent listener, tilting his head and wagging his tail at the right moments, making Tank feel less alone than he had in years. Tank assumed Buddy was a stray who had been abandoned or lost for months. His coat had been so dirty and matted when Tank found him that it was impossible to tell how well cared for he had been. Tank gave him a bath, fed him regularly, and watched him grow stronger and more beautiful each day. The customers at Tank's shop were amazed by the gentle giant and his even gentler dog. Buddy had a gift for making people smile, even the grumpiest motorcycle owners who came in complaining about repairs. Children in the neighborhood started stopping by just to pet the friendly golden retriever who had somehow tamed the scary tattooed man. The reunion was arranged for the next morning at Central Park, the same place where Tank had learned the truth about Buddy. Tank barely slept that night, holding Buddy a little closer, memorizing the feeling of the dog's warm fur against his hand, knowing that tomorrow everything would change. He woke up early and gave Buddy the best breakfast he could make, scrambled eggs and bacon, the kind of meal he wished he could afford to give him every day. Buddy seemed to sense something was different, staying closer to Tank than usual, his tail wagging but his eyes showing concern. Jason arrived at the park 30 minutes early, pacing nervously near the entrance. He had hardly slept since getting Tank's phone call. Part of him was afraid to hope too much, afraid that this would be another false lead that would crush his heart again. But something in the man's voice had sounded genuine, and Jason couldn't shake the feeling that today might be the day he had been praying for. When Tank's motorcycle rumbled into the parking lot with a golden dog riding behind him, Jason's eyes filled with tears. Even from a distance, he could tell it was Buddy. The way the dog held his head, the exact shade of his fur, the familiar size and shape that Jason had memorized over 5 years of companionship. Tank parked his bike and carefully helped Buddy down. The dog looked around curiously, taking in new scents and sounds. Then suddenly, his head turned sharply toward the park entrance. His whole body went rigid with excitement as he spotted a familiar figure running toward them. The moment Tank loosened his grip on the leash, Buddy took off like a golden rocket. He raced across the grass faster than Tank had ever seen him move, his tail wagging so hard his whole body wiggled with joy. Jason dropped to his knees just as Buddy reached him, and dog and young man collided in a reunion that made everyone in the park stop and stare. Buddy covered Jason's face with kisses, while Jason buried his hands in the dog's fur, sobbing with relief and overwhelming happiness. Jason kept repeating Buddy's name over and over, as if he couldn't believe his best friend was really there in his arms again. Tank watched from a distance, his own eyes damp with unexpected emotion. He had never seen such pure joy, such obvious love between a person and an animal. The way Buddy trembled with excitement, the way Jason held him like he never wanted to let go again, confirmed that Tank had made the right choice. After several minutes, Jason looked up and saw the big tattooed man standing quietly by his motorcycle. Through his tears, Jason didn't see the intimidating exterior that most people noticed first. He saw the kindness in Tank's eyes, the gentle way he had cared for Buddy, and the sacrifice this stranger had made. Jason approached Tank with Buddy close beside him, still not quite believing his best friend was safe. When he tried to thank Tank, the words came out jumbled and emotional. Tank, uncomfortable with gratitude, tried to brush off Jason's thanks, but Jason wouldn't let him. Jason pressed the reward money into Tank's hands despite Tank's protests. But more than that, Jason did something that surprised them both. He invited Tank to visit Buddy anytime, gave him his phone number, and told him that anyone who had taken such good care of his best friend would always be welcome in their lives. As Jason and Buddy walked away together, Tank realized something had changed inside him. For 2 weeks, he had experienced what it felt like to be needed, to love something completely, and to make a sacrifice for someone else's happiness. Buddy had taught him that his heart was bigger than he had ever imagined. Tank climbed back on his motorcycle, but this time he didn't feel empty. He felt proud. He had done something good, something important. And somehow, even though he had given up the dog he loved, he felt like he had gained something even more valuable. He had gained faith in himself, proof that he could be the kind of man who does the right thing even when it hurts. As he rode home, Tank carried with him the memory of Jason's smile, Buddy's joy, and the knowledge that true love sometimes means letting go so others can hold on. He had helped create one of life's most beautiful moments, a reunion between best friends who belonged together. In the weeks that followed, Jason kept his promise. He brought Buddy to visit Tank regularly, and an unexpected friendship grew between the young college student and the tough motorcycle mechanic. They discovered they had more in common than either would have guessed, and Buddy seemed to love bringing his 2 favorite humans together. Jason walked out of the exam room feeling relieved and confident. He had answered every question and felt good about his performance. The spring afternoon was warm and pleasant as he strolled across campus toward his car. He checked his phone and saw 7 missed calls from his mother, all within the last hour. His stomach dropped. His mother never called him during exams unless something was seriously wrong. With shaking fingers, he pressed play on her voicemail. His mother's panicked voice filled his ears, and each word felt like a punch to his chest. Buddy was gone, missing, lost. Jason ran to his car so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. His hand shook as he started the engine and called his mother back. She was crying as she explained how she had found the back gate wide open and no sign of Buddy anywhere in the yard or house. She had already searched the neighborhood, called his name for an hour, and contacted animal control. The 20-minute drive home felt like 20 hours. Jason's mind raced with horrible possibilities. What if Buddy was hit by a car? What if someone took him? What if he was scared and hiding somewhere, waiting for Jason to find him? The guilt was overwhelming. He should have checked the gate. He should have been more careful. This was all his fault. Jason burst through the front door to find his mother pacing in the kitchen, his father speaking on the phone with the local animal shelter. The house felt empty and wrong without Buddy's greeting at the door. His food and water bowl sat untouched, his favorite tennis ball lying in the exact spot where he had left it that morning. Without wasting time, Jason grabbed his laptop and started designing missing dog flyers. He used his favorite photo of Buddy, the one where his golden fur gleamed in the sunlight and his brown eyes sparkled with happiness. In large letters, he wrote "Missing Doggy" and included all of Buddy's details, his phone number, and a reward of $500 from his college savings account. While the flyers printed, Jason changed into comfortable clothes and walking shoes. He wasn't going to sit around waiting for phone calls. He was going to find his best friend. For the next 6 hours, Jason walked every street in their neighborhood and the surrounding areas. He taped flyers to telephone poles, handed them to everyone he met, and showed Buddy's photo to anyone who would look. His voice grew hoarse from calling Buddy's name over and over again. Mrs. Henderson from next door joined him, along with Mike and Lisa from college, who drove over as soon as they heard the news. Soon, a small group of friends and neighbors were searching different areas, all calling for Buddy and asking people if they had seen a golden retriever. As darkness fell, Jason's hope began to turn into despair. Where could Buddy be? The dog had never wandered off before, never left their yard without Jason. Buddy was smart, but he was also trusting. What if someone had taken him? Jason tried not to think about all the terrible things that could happen to a lost dog. That night, Jason barely slept. Every car that drove by made him jump up and look out the window, hoping to see Buddy running down the street. He left the back door open and put Buddy's favorite blanket outside, hoping the familiar scent would guide him home. He checked social media every few minutes, shared posts about Buddy on every group and page he could find. His parents tried to comfort him, but Jason blamed himself completely. If he hadn't been so distracted about the exam, if he had just taken 2 seconds to make sure the gate was properly closed, Buddy would be safe at home right now. By Wednesday morning, Jason had visited every animal shelter within 30 miles, left flyers at veterinary offices, and contacted rescue groups. His phone rang constantly with people who thought they might have seen Buddy, but each lead turned into disappointment. Jason's friends begged him to eat something, to get some rest, but he couldn't think about anything except finding Buddy. His best friend was out there somewhere, probably scared and confused, and Jason wouldn't stop looking until he brought him home safe. Day 2 of searching began with Jason feeling desperate but determined. He would not give up on Buddy. They had saved each other once before, and somehow he would find a way to save him again. Tank bought Buddy a collar and leash, toys, and proper dog food. He took him for long walks in the evenings, and they would sit together in the small park near Tank's apartment, watching the sunset. For the first time in months, Tank felt peace. Neither Tank nor Buddy knew that just 20 miles away, a heartbroken young man was still searching desperately for his best friend, putting up new flyers every day, and never giving up hope that somehow, someway, they would find each other again. The truth was about to surface in the most unexpected way, and 3 lives were about to intersect in a moment that would change everything for all of them. Sometimes the most beautiful reunions come from the most unlikely friendships, and sometimes the people who seem the most different on the outside share the biggest hearts on the inside. Tank had found something precious in Buddy, but he was about to learn that the greatest gift he could give would be letting go of what he had grown to love, so that others could find their way back to each other. Love, he was about to discover, sometimes means making the hardest choice of all. The discovery happened on a Tuesday evening that started like any other. Tank had taken Buddy to Central Park for their usual walk after closing the shop. The spring air was warm, and families were out enjoying the beautiful weather. Buddy, as always, charmed everyone they met with his gentle nature and gorgeous golden coat. Tank was feeling better about life than he had in months. His shop was still struggling financially, but caring for Buddy had given him a new sense of purpose. He had even started eating better and drinking less, wanting to be the best caretaker he could be for his four-legged friend. They were walking past the playground when Tank heard a little girl's excited voice pierce through the evening sounds. A small child with pigtails was pointing directly at Buddy, jumping up and down with excitement. Tank's heart sank as he heard her words clearly. The mother approached cautiously, clearly nervous about Tank's intimidating appearance, but too concerned to stay away. In her hand was a crumpled piece of paper that she held out for Tank to see. It was a missing dog flyer. Buddy's face looked back at Tank from the paper, and the description matched perfectly. Golden Retriever, 5 years old, answers to Buddy. But what really broke Tank's heart was the message at the bottom, written in desperate handwriting that someone had added by hand. "Please help me find my best friend. He means everything to me." Tank stared at the flyer for a long time, while Buddy sat patiently beside him, unaware that their world was about to change forever. The phone number was local. The dog he had come to love, the companion who had helped heal his lonely heart, belonged to someone else, someone who was probably going through the same kind of pain Tank had felt when Rebecca left, but worse. The mother waited quietly while Tank absorbed this information. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the way he looked down at the dog with genuine affection. When Tank finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Tank asked the woman where she had gotten the flyer. She explained that missing dog posters were everywhere in neighborhoods 20 miles south. A young man had been searching for weeks, visiting every shelter, posting on every social media group, never giving up hope. That night, Tank sat on his couch with Buddy curled up beside him, staring at the crumpled flyer. He had grown to love this dog more than he had ever loved anything in his life. Buddy had brought joy into his darkest days, had given him a reason to get up each morning, had shown him what it meant to care for something other than himself. But as Tank looked into Buddy's trusting brown eyes, he knew what he had to do. Somewhere out there was a young man who was heartbroken, who probably blamed himself for losing his best friend, who went to sleep every night wondering if he would ever see his beloved dog again. Tank understood that kind of love because he felt it too. And because he loved Buddy so much, he had to do the right thing, even if it meant breaking his own heart. True love sometimes means letting go, even when it's the hardest thing in the world to do. With shaking hands, Tank picked up his phone and dialed the number on the flyer. His throat felt tight as he listened to the phone ring once, twice. On the third ring, a young man's voice answered with desperate hope. Tank took a deep breath and said the words that would change 3 lives forever. Words that would reunite a boy and his best friend, but would also prove that sometimes the most unexpected people have the biggest hearts. Words that showed love isn't about keeping something for yourself, but about doing what's best for those you care about, no matter how much it costs you. 20 miles away from where Jason was desperately searching, Marcus Rodriguez was having the worst week of his 35 years of life. Everyone called him Tank because of his massive size and intimidating appearance. At 6 feet 4 inches tall and covered in tattoos from his neck to his knuckles, Tank looked like the kind of man mothers warned their children to stay away from. His motorcycle repair shop, which he had built from nothing over 10 years, was drowning in debt. The bank had sent him 3 final notices, and he had exactly 1 week to come up with $15,000 or lose everything he had worked for. His longtime girlfriend Rebecca had left him 2 days ago, taking most of her belongings while he was at work and leaving only a note saying she couldn't handle his problems anymore. Tank had been drinking too much lately, trying to numb the pain of watching his life fall apart. He slept poorly, ate badly, and spent most of his time alone in the cluttered apartment above his shop. The few friends he had were either busy with their own lives or tired of listening to his problems. This particular Thursday morning, Tank was riding back from what might have been his last job interview for months. The manager at the construction company had taken one look at Tank's tattoos and facial hair and barely listened to his qualifications before saying they would call them back. Tank knew that call would never come. The sun was bright, but his mood was dark as he rode his black Harley-Davidson down Highway 89. The powerful engine rumbled beneath him, and normally the feeling of riding would lift his spirits. But today, nothing could shake the heavy feeling in his chest. He was thinking about calling his sister in California, maybe asking to crash on her couch for a while, until he figured out his next move. Tank was so lost in his worried thoughts that he almost missed the flash of golden fur near the side of the road. His trained eye caught the movement just in time, and he slowed his bike down to get a better look. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. A beautiful golden retriever was walking dangerously close to the busy highway. Cars were speeding by at 60 miles per hour, honking their horns and swerving around the confused dog. The animal looked exhausted and scared, his tongue hanging out as he panted heavily in the warm sun. Tank had always had a soft spot for animals, though he never talked about it with anyone. As a child, he had rescued countless stray cats and injured birds, much to his tough father's disapproval. Even now, he secretly donated money to the local animal shelter whenever he could afford it, though he never let anyone know. Without hesitation, Tank pulled his motorcycle over to the shoulder of the road and turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt strange after hours of riding. He could hear the whoosh of cars speeding past and the frightened panting of the lost dog. Tank approached slowly, knowing that his intimidating appearance might scare the animal even more. He had learned long ago that animals could sense intentions better than humans. This dog was clearly terrified and exhausted, probably lost for days judging by his matted fur and thin appearance. Tank spoke in the gentle voice he used when no one was around to hear him. The voice that came out when he fed stray cats behind his shop or talked to the old horse at the farm next to his childhood home. It was a voice completely different from the gruff tone he used with customers and strangers. The golden retriever looked up at him with tired brown eyes that seemed to be pleading for help. Tank could see intelligence in those eyes, and something else that broke his heart. This wasn't a stray dog. This was someone's beloved pet, lost and frightened, and trying to find his way home. Tank reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out some beef jerky he had been saving for lunch. He held it out slowly, letting the dog catch the scent. The animal was so hungry that hunger overcame fear, and he cautiously approached the big man beside the loud motorcycle. As the dog gently took the food from Tank's hand, their eyes met. In that moment, Tank felt something he hadn't experienced in months. A sense of purpose, of being needed. This beautiful creature was depending on him, and Tank wasn't going to let him down. Tank's life began to turn around in small but important ways. The confidence he had gained from caring for Buddy and doing the right thing helped him in job interviews. He found work at a construction company, where his boss valued his skills more than his appearance. Slowly but surely, he began to rebuild his life. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when Jason visited with Buddy, the three of them would sit in Tank's small apartment, sharing simple meals and easy conversation. In these moments, Tank understood that love multiplies rather than divides, and that the best friendships often come from the most unexpected places. The biker had thought it was just a lost dog, but he had discovered it was so much more. It was someone's best friend, someone's family, and ultimately, it became the bridge to friendships that would last a lifetime. In helping Buddy find his way home, Tank had found his way to becoming the man he was meant to be.